Hello and welcome to Devil's Advocate. Lord Mountbatten's daughter, Lady Pamela, has written a book, India Remembered, about the time she spent in the country when her father was the last Viceroy and the first Governor-General. Tonight, in the first of a two-part series, I shall talk to Lady Pamela about her memories of Jawaharlal Nehru, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Lady Pamela, let's start with the subject that everyone is most curious about, the relationship between your mother, Edwina Mountbatten, and Jawaharlal Nehru. In your introduction, you write, towards the end of the 15 months we spent in India, the immediate attraction between my mother and Panditji blossomed into love. What do you mean by love?
I mean a very deep love. The kind of love that the old knights of old, a chivalric love, really. Nowadays, everybody assumes that it has to be a carnal love. But you can have just as deep an emotional love with two like souls, in a way, people who really grow to understand each other and to be able to listen to each other and to compliment each other and find solace in each other.
In your book, you write with incredible candor, my mother had already had lovers. My father was inured to it. But then you add the relationship with Nehru remained platonic. Can you be really sure of that?
I was with them most of the time. We called it a gooseberry. It would be very awkward for them, you know, if I was around the whole time. I would say yes, because anyway, Nehru was a very honorable man who liked my father. There was a great affection between the two. And it was nearly always in my father's houses, either in England or in India, that they were together. And I think he would have never dishonored his friends.
But you know that at the time, and in fact even afterwards, people have speculated about it and said that the friendship went a lot further. Did this speculation hurt your father? Did he ever object to the fact that he must have known behind his back people were joking possibly about the Viceroy being cuckolded?
I think it shows what confidence he had and how it was correct, in that my mother died in Borneo, working for Save the Children Fund and St. John Ambulance Brigade. And she died suddenly out there in the middle of work, and on her bedside table was a packet of Panditji's letters. And in her will, we found she had left the whole collection of letters to my father, and they were an enormous number. There were suitcases full of these letters. And after, when we found that she had left these letters to him, he asked me to read them. He said he was 99% sure that there was nothing that would wound him or worry him or diminish him in any way, but that was just that 1% of doubt fluttering in his heart. And he said, darling, will you read them first? And so I read them, and they were wonderful letters, but nothing at all that would have distressed my father.
Were you yourself at all apprehensive? Did you, as a daughter, perhaps a younger generation, think maybe there'll be a sentence, a stray phrase that might give the game away?
No, I didn't, because also I think I didn't really attach the sexual importance to the whole affair that other people did. To me, they were two amazing people whose place in history was considerable, what they did. I thought that was the important thing about them. And I loved them both very much. And I wasn't particularly interested if they were tumbling around in bed together. And I was certain they weren't.
As I said, there was a lot of speculation at the time, and undoubtedly this must have been the source of jokes which perhaps people hid from you. But your father was very generous and understanding. In a letter that you quote in your book, he wrote to your sister Patricia, she, meaning Edwina, and Jawaharlal are so sweet together. They really dote on each other. Pammy and I are doing everything we can to be tactful and helpful. Was it easy to be as tactful as he makes it seem? It couldn't have been quite that easy.
Yes, very easy indeed. You just have to go out of the room. But also...
So there were moments when he felt, I ought to just leave them alone.
Yes, but this would be, they were both fully dressed, sitting on a sofa in the study or something like that.
But there wasn't a twinge of jealousy or perhaps a hurt emotion?
No, because I think he trusted them both. And also, my mother was so happy with Jawaharlal around. She knew that she was helping him at a time when it's very lonely at the pinnacle of power. It really is. And if she could help, and my father knew that it helped her, because a woman can, after a long marriage, and they had had their silver wedding, so they'd been over 25 years together, a woman can feel perhaps frustrated and perhaps neglected if somebody is working terribly hard. And so if a new affection comes into her life, a new admiration, she blossoms and she's happy.
So both of them, in a sense, fulfilled a need. Both Jawaharlal and Edwina needed each other.
I think they did, and my father understood that need, and of course it made my mother, who could be quite difficult at times, as many very extraordinary women can be, and yet at this time when she was so happy with everybody, it was lovely to be with her. There were no prickles.
You have a lovely phrase in your book. You say there existed a happy threesome based on some firm understanding on all sides. What was the firm understanding? Not to probe too deeply, just in case you stumbled on something you didn't want to know?
No, I don't think. I think that there were no doubts that my father was convinced that it was just a friendship. They would like to talk together and be together. And he was convinced that was all it was. And I certainly was convinced that was all it was.
Much of this friendship and affection, much of this relationship actually lived its way in the letters they wrote each other. You revealed in your book that Pandit Nehru wrote to your mother practically every night at 2 o'clock.
But the letters, they would, as I think I mentioned, they would have an endearment to begin with. And sadly always that they were missing each other so much. They wouldn't see each other for 6 months at a time. And then probably they only saw each other twice a year.
But there is a particular letter that Panditji wrote to your mother where it seems quite obvious to anyone that he's just completely bowled over. He writes, "Suddenly I realized that there was a deeper attachment between us, that some uncontrollable force drew us to one another." Was he, in a sense, more in love because he was a lonely man than your mother may have been?
No, I don't think so. But again, I think he is talking about the emotional more than the physical. I think suddenly they realized that they were two souls together, not necessarily two bodies together.
So all the speculation that there was a physical side is in fact unfair, because it's been referred to by historians, it's been referred to by biographers. That's unfair.
Yes, I think, as I say again, I don't understand this obsession that people who have a deep emotion with each other must immediately have a physical relationship.
Except for the fact that it's taken as simply usual today, everyone does.
But these were two very unusual people.
But Panditji was a widower. He needed female affection. He must have wanted it. Your mother was alluring and beautiful. They were so close to each other. It would be natural for the emotional to become sexual.
It could be, and maybe everybody will think I'm being very naive, but the fact that she had had lovers in the past, somehow this was so different. It really was. And the letters, I mean, if you were deeply physically in love, your whole letter would be about the other person and your need of them physically, and it would be that kind of love letter. These letters had an opening paragraph of tenderness, and the end would be also tender and romantic and nice like that. But 3/4 of the letter was unburdening himself of all his worries and his disappointments or his hopes and all his idealism coming out for the extraordinary time of India at her rebirth in history, and it is the history of India as an independent nation.
And of course, if there was a physical side, that would be part of the history of India. It would be part of the romantic side of the history of India. Would you say that every bit of you is convinced that there was no sexual side? But it's possible there may have been, because they were adults and they would have done it privately. One can't rule it out 100%. But 90% you do.
If you long to believe that, then let me prevent you. But I don't believe it. I believe just that they loved being together, that they could talk about anything, that yes, they might like to hold hands or to hug or something like that. I don't believe, I really do not believe, because of the fact that my father was so often around and that there was not a hint of that.
And Panditji wouldn't have hurt his friend.
I think so. Panditji was a very honorable man.
There's another aspect of the relationship that you refer to in your book. You say that the Edwina and Nehru relationship was also of use to your father as Viceroy, that he often appealed to Panditji through the influence your mother had, and that this was particularly useful handling tricky situations like Kashmir.
That is true, and he did use her like that, but he certainly wasn't going to throw her. He didn't say to her, go and become the Prime Minister's lover because I need you to intercede. It was a byproduct of this deep affection.
He realized that there was an emotional relationship that he could use for the betterment of everyone.
Absolutely.
Many people in India believe that, in fact, the decision Jawaharlal Nehru took to refer Kashmir to the United Nations was taken under your father's advice. Would that have been an area where your mother's influence would have been particularly useful?
I think it could have been, well, because Panditji, being a Kashmiri, of course, you know, inevitably the emotional side comes in from one's own country, doesn't it? And my father, just in dry conversation, mightn't have been able to get his viewpoint over, but with my mother translating it for Panditji and making, you know, appealing to his heart and more than his mind that he should really behave like this, I think probably that did happen.
So in a very interesting sense, Panditji had a love in your mother, and your father had a bit of influence through your mother on Panditji.
Yes, I think so. But what was the important outcome of it all was really for the good of India.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I think Mrs. Gandhi, when she became Prime Minister, she was a very, very clever politician, an amazing woman. But Panditji was a real statesman. It never occurred to him to make anything out of his position. He never made money out of it. He was the real idealist. It was for the good of India, always.
In fact, you write in your book, if you had asked me who I loved most after my father and mother or my sister, undoubtedly it was Panditji. In fact, you called him Mamu.
Absolutely, absolutely. I soon reverted to Panditji because it didn't really seem very easy with all his nieces around.
But at 17, he was Mamu.
He was Mamu. He signed a photograph to me as Mamu.
And it's in the book.
Yes, and I thought of him like that, but I must say I, though, did have enough respect, actually, to back away a little bit and to call, he went on calling me Pammy, but I called him Pandit.
The friendship between the two families continued right through the life of Indira Gandhi, but has it stretched to include Sonia Gandhi, Rahul and Priyanka, her children?
Yes, but not through me, really, because I've not seen much of them. But my sister and brother-in-law saw, well, I met Sonia, obviously, once or twice. But my sister knew them much better because I think that one of their children was
at Cambridge.
At Cambridge. And so there was that connection. And when my sister and brother-in-law would go to India, they would definitely see them.
Lady Pamela, let's take a break. At that point, I want to come back and talk about your family and your memories of Jinnah and Gandhi. That's in a moment after the break. Welcome back to Devil's Advocate and an interview with Lord Mountbatten's daughter, Lady Pamela. Lady Pamela is the daughter of the last Viceroy and the first Governor-General of India. You met all the key players in 1947. Let's start with Gandhi. What was he like at the age of 17?
Well, of course, one was thrilled to be meeting already a mythical character. And Gandhiji was such a marvelous person that the moment you met him, he had such a twinkle, but he was so simple with people. that, you know, one was just delighted to meet him.
There's a lovely photograph in your book taken the day Gandhi met your parents for the first time, the 31st of March 1947. He's walking back, it seems, from the garden into Viceregal Lodge, and he has his hand resting on your mother's shoulder. How did that happen at the very first meeting?
Well, because normally, you forget that he was a very frail old man by the time we were there. And normally he had his great-niece Manu with him. And she would be a support for him. And she wasn't there, but my mother was there, so my mother became the support automatically. And my mother also would have wanted to be there. He was frail, she was worried he might stumble or something. It was the most natural thing in the world. And I suppose because there were photographers at the meeting, the photographer thought, ah, that's a very good shot.
In fact, in the months that followed, Gandhi was a frequent visitor to Viceregal Lodge. He would always bring his goat curds with him. You mentioned an occasion when he absolutely insisted that your father tried. What did your father do?
Well, of course, my Gandhiji was a wicked tease. I mean, my father called him a saint, but saints can be very difficult, and they're wickedly mischievous usually. And it was the first meeting, actually, when my father didn't like to refuse. He thought it would be very rude to refuse. And he tried several times, politely. But Gandhiji said, no, 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 I insist, you must try. And my father was appalled. He thought it was sort of green sludge. And even when you get something you hate stuck in your cheek, very difficult to get rid of it. And so after that, I must say, he was very firm. He said, Gandhiji, you have yours, and I will have mine.
Now, the other person you got to meet was, of course, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. You write in your book that Jinnah was impervious to your father's charm. You say, my father could talk of nothing else because he could not crack Jinnah, and this had never happened to him before.
And it hadn't happened to him before, but this was the most crucial meeting that it should work, because he'd had, it was so easy to be intimate with Panditji and with Gandhiji even. So my father hoped that in order to be able to talk to these people, to relate to them, to work with them, it was essential that they get on good terms.
Did they get on good terms?
No, no. And this was what distressed my father so much, because he so much wanted to give as much to Pakistan later on as he did to India. But he was repulsed. Each time he tried to offer, no thank you very much.
Was it Jinnah's personality that was the problem? People in India see him as reserved, even doer.
Yes, it was. It was. There was no approaching him. Once we did see him smile, that was when we came back from the drive in Karachi on the 14th of August when Pakistan was created. And they came back from that drive at which a bomb was said to be going to be thrown. They came back alive, and he had a radiant smile, and so did Fatima.
But that was the only occasion?
The only occasion.
So in a real sense, Jinnah's personality repulsed your father's friendship. He wouldn't let your father get close to him.
My father had respect for him, and he had respect for my father. They respected each other.
But no firmness?
No warmth at all.
So that was the difference. Indian leaders like Nehru and Gandhi became friends, but Jinnah never became a friend.
That's right.
You write in your epilogue, I felt far more Indian than English when I left at the age of 17 or 18. 60 years later, how do you look back on India today?
Well, of course, after 60 years, I am English. I've been living in England all the time. I have a wide circle of English friends. So, of course, now I feel English. But when my Indian friends come, there's such a warmth, and one's so thrilled to see them again. I just have a wider circle of friends.
So India still remains a very special country.
And the 15th of August is the most important day in my life, having witnessed it.
Lady Pamela, let's end this particular interview there. Tomorrow I want to talk to you about the transfer of power, and in particular, partition and independence. That's tomorrow night on CNBC at 10:30. But for tonight, goodbye, good night.